everyone, and welcome to another episode of Timed Out with me, Melinda, Farrell, and Lachlan McKirdy for Sporting News Australia, doing a bit of a whip around the world of cricket in 3 minutes. Only 3 minutes. We'll be timed out. And as always, Lockie, your task for the week is to make sure we have, to do the timing and make sure that we have a reasonable sound effect at the end. Have you done your job?
I like to think so. I think I've really come to the table with a strong contribution this week.
Okay, better hope so. You know, as always, your job depends upon it.
Good.
Let's get started. Some other people who are backing themselves, I imagine. The Australian men's team off to the Caribbean. They left, they have arrived. They're currently in a 3-day quarantine, which is pretty mild compared to many parts of the world. But we have had confirmed today there are 2 members of the travelling party who haven't been fully vaccinated, 1 player, 1 member of the coaching staff. They were late in their call-ups, and so we'll be able to get the timings right for the double doses, but they will be fully vaccinated before they get to Bangladesh. So at some point abroad they will get their vaccinations. But it's hard to know what to make of this tour, really, isn't it, Lockie? It's these short format tours are so important with the World Cup, T20 World Cup looming on the horizon. But what are we going to make of this Australian side?
Well, first off, I want to say well done to them. A 16.5-hour flight direct from Brisbane to the West Indies. That would have been a hard slog, although I'm pretty sure I saw photos of a couple of them, including Aaron Finch, up in the pointy end of the plane, so that would have been all right. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting squad, this one, looking ahead to the T20 World Cup. Obviously, a lot has been made of those 7 players who have opted out of the side, and realistically, for maybe even 5 of those 7, are kind of in your guaranteed team for a T20 World Cup. So there's a lot of places here up for grabs, even if Trevor Hones and kind of what he's been saying, that it could put them above in their rankings in terms of the T20 World Cup if players perform on this tour and then in Bangladesh as well. So yeah, I'm really looking for some of those middle order batters to stand up. I mean, that's traditionally been a spot where Australia has struggled in the history of T20 cricket, not just in recent years. So obviously we've got our favourite, Dan Christian, who is going to be on that tour. And I think looking at the side, there's not too many middle order options. It kind of looks like there's 4 or 5 batters or all-rounders, really, playing for 4 spots. So really only 1 or 2 is going to miss out each time because it's quite a bowling-heavy squad. So I think there's a really good chance for the likes of, obviously, Christian, but even someone like a Mitch Marsh, a Ben McDermott, to really make a claim for that middle order position. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most.
Yeah, and of course Australia wouldn't have recalled Ben McDermott from the UK where he was playing if they didn't really want to have a look at him. I'm with you. Dan Christian, yes, you know, is my favourite. I just think what a story that would be. He's been so successful with so many T20 franchises. And not only is it the skills that he brings, but the practical nous, the experience that he has. I think it would be absolutely wonderful if he got in, and I feel that he should have had a lot more opportunities to play for Australia in the past several years in the T20 format.
Without a doubt.
Beautifully bowled.
There you go. That's what I had working this week.
You have gone to some effort to get that, haven't you?
I have. I had to get the classic Bill Laurie piece of commentary there. I mean, it felt appropriate.
Well, we'll pay that one. You've definitely kept your job safe for another week.
Good.
No pressure on next week. Yeah, tick. I don't know how
I can feed the dog this week. Good to know.
Well, to be fair, she's a beautiful dog. I would never let her go hungry.
Yes, that is true. No, good.
Moving on to our next topic then. It's been pretty well known or assumed for quite some time that the upcoming T20 World Cup would not be held in India after the IPL was called off. So there are reports now coming out that Sourav Ganguly, the boss at the BCCI, has reached out to people and told them that it's definitely going to be on in the UAE. I guess that's one of the puzzle pieces sorted once we get official confirmation of all of that. But we still don't have any dates. And there seem to be so many moving parts to that time of year, particularly for Australian and England players, with everything going on before the resumed IPL before the T20 World Cup and then into the Ashes. You just wonder how they're going to manage all of this, the managers of the teams.
I think when you look at kind of the decision of those 7 players who opted out of this tour, once you really start putting the pieces together of just how much cricket there's going to be at the end of this year, it kind of really makes sense. Not necessarily just because of the amount of hotel quarantine, but just the amount of burnout from the amount of cricket that there's going to be. It's quite remarkable. I mean, on the decision to move it to the UAE and Oman, I think it was a no-brainer. I think maybe they could have risked it, they could have left it a bit later, but they had to make a decision pretty soon just to be able to get on top of all the logistics needed to host a T20 World Cup, really. So I think that was a no-brainer decision, and it'll just mean there's a little bit more security around hosting the tournament. It will be interesting to see what the pitches are like. You and I have spoken about this before, about if that's where the IPL is going to be, if it's going to be at all the same stadiums. What are the pitches going to be like for a World Cup? But, I mean, yeah, I just think there's so much cricket at the end of this year. You got the Ashes, you've got Australia's one-off test against Afghanistan that pretty much, I think we worked out that if you're involved in the World Cup final, if the Aussies make it, they will not be able to play in that match. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the dates and what happens with the international teams who have to select cricketers for those games, but also think beyond that as well.
Yeah, it is really tricky, and because you know that it's such a fluid situation generally around the world that things can change very quickly, which affects quarantine, which affects player availability, and so once we know what the dates are, it's fascinating to me, because even when we know what the dates are, we don't know who's going to be at the final. So we won't actually know the dates when any teams are going to finish, and the knock-on effect for that, probably not so much for the Afghanistan test, because I think that will just be a test team that's made up of players who aren't at the T20 World Cup. But then beyond that, it is tight as a drum when you look at the various dates, and Australia's cricketers, with all of that happening, most of them aren't going to play much.
Bill's had enough of that one, I think.
But fair enough.
No, it is interesting because obviously we look at the Australian players and whether they'll be involved, but the Afghanistan players, I'm sure there'll be a bit of crossover there if they can make a very good run in the T20 World Cup as well.
Yeah, it's tight. It's as tight as tight can be. Okay, our third topic for Timed Out this week. Well, speaking of how things can change and bubbles and quarantines and everything else, there are 3 Sri Lankan players have been very naughty boys. Lockie, tell us a bit what's been happening up in Durham.
So yeah, you've got the 3 players, Kusal Mendes, Danushka Gunathalaka and Niroshan Dikvala. I mean, they've been suspended after they admitted to breaching the team biosecurity bubble in Durham on Sunday, and they kind of got dobbed in after a video emerged showing them out in a public place. I mean, yeah, it's just, in this day and age with everything going on and the restrictions, surely it was just a chance. That was just really stupidity, and I guess the Sri Lankan Cricket Board had no other choice.
Well, they didn't. Hey, it's a good sign of the visibility of cricketers that those Sri Lankan players were recognised too, out on the street from a moving car. So someone's seen them and been on the job really quickly. And that for me was really interesting, that they were being dobbed in straight away. They've said that there was no actual breach of the bubble, in that they haven't compromised the bubble, I guess I should say. Yes. It was breached but not compromised. And the series is going ahead. Really, you can imagine Sri Lanka would come down pretty hard on this, because those 3 players would almost certainly have started in the first of 3 ODIs. They've lost the T20s 3-0. You've got a period leading up to a T20 World Cup, and you've got players who have done that. I mean, I have some sympathy in that. Look, it must be really difficult for players, and to be fair, Durham's a beautiful city. It'd be very, very hard to resist going into the centre of Durham Cathedral. It's all very university, very pretty.
I guess we have to think about the contract situation that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago as well. That, I mean, it's definitely not good for this trio of players that they put themselves in the spotlight in this way when there is such a precarious scenario happening with the Sri Lankan cricket contracts at the moment.
Yeah, you don't want to really tick off your bosses when you've had all sorts of pay issues going on.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, that can't be good for them. But it's going to be a pretty tough proposition for them now going into these T20Is, and just if they are taking it really seriously, what that means in terms of if they issue any bans, how long those bans may go for, and then how much that may disrupt Sri Lanka's own preparation for the T20 World Cup. So it's an absolute mess.
It really is. And I mean, I'm sure we'll see more of these around the world in terms of cricket. We saw Will Sutherland, I think, was fined for $5,000 for a BBL bubble breach last year. And yeah, there's just going to be a whole heap more of this in terms of players just can't help themselves, I guess.
I was just waiting for it. My internal sense of timing was ready for that one. I'm getting better.
Very nice.
And finally, well, it was an absolute shellacking of India's women by England women in the first of their 3 ODIs. Remember, it's a multi-format series, so points for all of these games. There was that thrilling draw in the one and only test match, but it wasn't a great start for India to the next leg of this tour.
No, it really wasn't. And I mean, you look at the platform they kind of built in their innings with the bat. I mean, Mithali Raj and Dipti Sharma, they put on a pretty decent partnership there, but they just weren't able to keep that strike rate going enough. I mean, Raj finished with a strike rate of about 66, Sharma also around 66, and it's just, you need to, once you're settled in one-day cricket, you really need to try and push that into the 80s and 90s at a bare minimum to get a competitive total. And it kind of goes to show they finished with 2 wickets left in the sheds and only had 201 runs. I mean, yeah, really, they should have timed their innings a little bit better than that, and it was just too easy for England to chase down.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, that would have been, quite a decent, sort of defendable total. But in the end, England got there. They lost just 2 wickets, and they had 91 balls remaining, which is just a huge win. Great news for England to see Tammy Beaumont looking in absolutely brilliant form. She was finding the boundary with great regularity. She finished 87 at a run of ball when you talk about strike rates. Nat Siva finished 74, also unbeaten, at a strike rate over run of ball. For any statisticians out there, I want to know how often in an ODI 2 not-out batters have finished with a strike rate of exactly 100. There's got to be a great stat out there. Maybe it's the first time. I don't know.
You just look at that scorecard and it is wonderful to look at. I mean, we were chatting before this as well about how not only Tammy and Nat, but Lauren Winfield-Hill, 16 off 20 for a strike rate of 80 flat. Heather Knight, 18 off 30 for a strike rate of 60 flat. So we've just got a whole heap of whole numbers, a whole heap of symmetry. Yeah, it's a sort of cricket scorecard that you go, they timed that well. I mean, it's a shame that they weren't chasing 200 and they didn't score it off the final ball of an over. I mean, and the run rate wasn't whole, but look, I can't complain too much. We've got a nice bit of symmetry there.
Of course, Australia playing both those sides in the next sort of 9 months. Not even that, actually. Now, the year's going fast. But you think in this series, I mean, India have it all ahead of them now. We saw some really encouraging things from them in the test, but do you think they have a chance to come back and overtake England?
It'll be hard in this series, especially in English conditions that they're not used to and haven't played that much in recently. Yeah. But I still think they can. I still think they can have an impact in the World Cup later this year. I think they're both of those sides are definitely ones to watch, even though Australia have this incredible winning streak going at the moment.
Yeah, of course, that happening in New Zealand in February, March.
It's
the year
close.
is going quickly.
Yeah.
Well, that is it. That is it for the week. Of course, always lots happening around the world of cricket. Make sure that you stay logged on to sportingnews.com, of course, not just for cricket, for all your other sporting needs, as they say. Yeah, thank you for joining me again, Lockie, and we will see you again next week. Pressure on you. I loved Bill Laurie, but we'll see what you can come up with next week.
Looking forward to it. I don't know how I top that, but I'll find a way. I'll definitely find a way.
Challenge on. Jobs on the line.